Per usual, there have been quite a few surprises so far during this free agency period. We've seen some rather interesting moves that weren't really expected, and a few that were rather predictable. In this video, we'll be going over some of the signings and trades, the most notable ones anyways, in an attempt to better understand each one and what it means for each team involved. And with that, here are some of the moves from free agency day 1 dissected. Since it's pretty much old news by now, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but the trade that sent Matt Murray over to Toronto was questioned by many after it happened. In order to try and cut their losses involving Murray, the Senators sent over a couple of draft picks and retained 25% of Murray's salary. So essentially, Murray is costing the Leafs around $4.6 million a season. And yesterday, some of the skepticism surrounding the deal faded. Keyword some, as Caps goalie Ilya Samsonov signed with Toronto on what appears to be a trial basis. Reason being, the goaltender was only locked in for a year and bears a cap hit of only $1.8 million. Samsonov, similarly to Murray, struggled last campaign and finished with a below .900 save percentage with a .896. Since he's only 25, Dubas has to be hoping that somehow the goaltender, with a little TLC, can evolve into the starter of the future. But for now, Samsonov will have Murray to help shoulder some of the workload. Interestingly, Jack Campbell, whose contract we'll discuss further on in the video, signed for $5 million. Therefore, the Leafs are paying about the same for the Murray-Samsonov tandem as they would have been for Campbell and Eric Kallgren, for example. So basically, in summary, Dubas let a pretty consistent goalie walk for nothing, only to take on two replacements that have struggled as of late. This is definitely a make it or break it move for the GM, who could be overseeing things for his last season in Toronto. Once the Vegas Golden Knights acquired Jack Eichel last season, the logical thought was that GM Kelly McCrimmon would be looking to move a key player or two this summer. And after Evgeny Dadonov was finally traded, the speculation then shifted to either William Karlsson or Max Pacioretty being dealt next. Pacioretty, who was traded in a similar style of trade as Marc-Andre Fleury, was last offseason given to the Carolina Hurricanes, along with Dylan Coghlan. Given being the formative word because, just like Fleury, Pacioretty's contract was taken on by Carolina for nothing in return. McCrimmon then turned around and gave Riley Smith an extension thereafter. When he was healthy last season, Pacioretty produced around a point per game offensively, with 37 points in 39 games played. The Hurricanes, who have been looking to improve their finishing capabilities, have received a 6-time 30-goal scorer who could have an upside. At 33 years of age, if he can stay healthy, the forward could really fit in nicely in Raleigh and help the Canes overcome their scoring woes next season. As for Vegas, so far, they aren't doing themselves any favors by making trades such as these. Not only is it a horrible look as far as optics are concerned, but you also have to think that Vegas could have gotten something in return if they'd waited things out. In my opinion, the signing right here was one of the easiest ones to predict. NHL insiders had the intel weeks in advance that Campbell could be the answer for the Oil in nets. And sure enough, GM Ken Holland apparently agrees. Since Toronto's GM Kyle Dubas decided to swap one Sault Ste. Marie goalie for another, the odd guy out per se was indeed Soup, aka Jack Campbell. It's pretty obvious that the net was up for the taking in Edmonton, due to Mikko Koskinen heading overseas to play in Europe, and Mike Smith's status still being up in the air at the moment. The contract itself is close to what Campbell was projected to receive and will be paying out $5 million for the next handful of seasons. Therefore, unless Holland signs someone else, it's looking like there will be the Campbell-Stewart-Skinner tandem in Oil Country for next campaign. Campbell, who played decently well for Toronto last season, recorded a .919 save percentage and a 2.64 goals against average after 49 games played. The move itself seems like a good one. It's a good fit, but the only real concern is the term, as Campbell will be 35 when the contract expires. And yet another signing that was more predictable than most, Claude Giroux has indeed signed with his hometown team, the Ottawa Senators. The contract itself, that's valued at $19.5 million, will carry a yearly cap hit, 6.5 AAV, and also has a full no-move clause built in. Last deadline, Giroux departed from his longtime team with cup aspirations as he joined the Florida Panthers. Unfortunately though, the Cats ended up losing to Tampa in the second round. Despite this though, Giroux told ESPN recently he hasn't let go of his dream to hoist Lord Stanley. "I wouldn't sign here if I didn't think we had a chance to win the cup. I'm not saying we're going to win the cup this year, but the plan is to build on it and have baby steps for that, Giroux said. Giroux, a well-known face-off specialist, will be bringing his usual offensive expertise, but in this particular case, his leadership will be incredibly valuable to the young Senators team. As they parted ways with Tony DeAngelo, the expectations for Carolina to bring in a DeAngelo replacement this free agency were pretty high. And since the market for D-men is pretty slim this year, Don Waddell decided to trade for longtime Shark Brent Burns, among other pieces. For months now, it's been no secret that San Jose has had the desire to rid themselves of a contract or two from the back end. The news then broke that either Erik Karlsson or Brent Burns would likely be dealt sooner rather than later from the Bay Area. And finally, the team was able to rid themselves of around 2/3 of the cost it would have been to keep Burns on the books until 2025. The Hurricanes, in turn, will only be paying out $5.28 million a season instead of the full $8 million. Even though he's 37 years of age, Burns proved last season that he's not slowing down just yet. With 54 points in 82 games played, Burns will probably be assuming the vacant spot on the right, previously occupied by DeAngelo on the top pairing. And finally, the biggest surprise that yesterday had to offer was a signing that brought Johnny Gaudreau to Ohio's capital. The day before free agency kicked off, we learned that Gaudreau would not be signing with the team that once drafted him. According to NHL insider Frank Saravalli, Gaudreau was offered a massive 8-year deal valued at $80 million by Calgary, one that he ended up turning down. For months, the speculation was that if Gaudreau didn't re-up with the Flames, then the only other options were going to be teams that were on the East Coast. However, the team that Gaudreau ended up joining wasn't exactly next door to New Jersey, as Gaudreau decided to stun the hockey world by agreeing to a 7-year deal valued at $68.25 million. According to an article from The Athletic, which I'll link below, some former teammates from the World Championships such as Zach Werenski, Eric Robinson, and former Jacket Cam Atkinson assured Gaudreau that he'd enjoy playing for the team that has the cannon that scares him. In all seriousness, the final decision for Johnny Hockey wasn't based on money or even sentimentality in the end. And for the first time in a long time, the Jackets could have a very lethal combination up front, featuring both Gaudreau and Patrick Laine. With 115 points recorded last season in Calgary, Gaudreau, at 28 years of age, still has plenty of good years ahead of him on ice. As far as the contract is concerned, the estimate was that Gaudreau could demand between $9.5 to $11 million per season. Therefore, in my opinion, this contract seems like a good one.